Hey everyone, Andrew here, and it's time for another review. So, it's nearing the end of March, and I said I would do a video every month, and I'm trying to. I really am. And of course, the second that I'm like, okay, I'm really gonna try to get back into this and start doing it more, I get called back to work. And I went from working 30 hours a week with a day off every 2 to 3 days to working 40 hours a week and doing that 5 days in a row. So I'm going to be a bit exhausted for the foreseeable future until things calm down a little bit or I can get back to it with my other schedule. We will see. But for now, I know that I really do want to keep doing this both for you and for me. So I figured the only way to do it is to just do it, and I decided to do with an idea that I came up with during the summer, where I really wanted to talk about the series that I kind of like. That I talked to some of my friends, and they didn't particularly like it. They just kind of scoffed when it came up, and it was like, okay. Granted, this is the friends that I'm always kind of at odds with. Where it's like everything I like, they hate, and everything I hate, they like. So, but if nothing else, they're good fuel for this. Because I think there's some good stuff in this. I think it's an interesting series. I think you just have to get over the fact that it is quite bizarre. Yeah, I'm talking about Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. And I considered doing the whole series, but that would be a, like 2 hour plus review because it's a series that changes with every arc. It's kind of the thing of I need to focus on each arc and break it down. So I figured I would do that, and I'm not going to do them all in a row right away type of thing. Like, I will do something different for next month, and I may do a different manga the month after that, or I may do the next in this series. I don't know yet. We'll have to see. This will be kind of my go-to when I'm trying to come up with something and I'm having some difficulty, but also just because if I really just want to talk about it, which there's some of these that I really do. So, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a anime manga series created by Hirohiko Araki, and it's kind of a odd twist on the anime that was very popular at the time, because this came out in the 1980s, of Fist of the North Star. So you're taking these big, burly men like Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Stallone-like person and having them be the main characters in these odd situations. And that's really interesting when you compare where that the first one had characters that looked like this, and then you get into chapters 7, 8, and 9, and the characters look like this. It's just a bit, it's kind of interesting that how times change. But we'll get to those when we get to them. So first we'll be starting with Phantom Blood. The plot of Phantom Blood is it takes place in the 19th century. It's in England, just outside of London. And it follows the family of the Joestars. So we have George Joestar, who is the patriarch, very wealthy, and has his only son, who is Jonathan Joestar, who is whose big goal is he wants to be a gentleman. A few years before the events of this series started, George Joestar ended up in a carriage accident that killed Jonathan's mother, and George nearly died, but he was rescued by a man named Dario. And basically, George was so indebted to Dario and owed such a debt that he's like, I'll do anything you want. And so Dario, a few years later, said, I'm sick, I'm dying, I need you to take care of my son. So George takes in a young Dio Brando into his house. And it's clear right away that Dio Brando is really, really evil. Like, the first thing he does, the second you see him, is he kicks Jonathan's dog as hard as he can. And I was looking into it, it's like, Dio is based off of serial killers. And it shows, because he is cold-blooded, he is merciless, he is vindictive. Look at him. Even as a child, he looks like he's gonna murder you. And he does not like Jonathan immediately. Jonathan tries to be friends with him, but Dio will have none of it. Dio ends up getting in a fist fight with Jonathan, which Jonathan actually wins. And then, in rage and spite, Dio murders Jonathan's dog and throws him in the fire kiln outside the house. Yeah, if you're an animal lover, this part is going to be a bit rough. I'm not even a big animal lover, and I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life. Like, jeez Louise, the way to make a villain that's immediately despicable, and you just are happy to hate him with every fiber of your beings. Yeah, and Jonathan finds said dog. It's pretty dark. It's pretty screwed up. And you also find out through Dio that his father Dario didn't even save George Joestar. He found the wreckage and found George Joestar and thought he was dead and was robbing his corpse. But George woke up and thought he was being rescued, so Dario used it to his advantage. But they both grow up in the family and develop into these very strong masculine men. They compete in sports against each other, and they have developed a bond of sorts. It's kind of a rivalry. It's not really a brotherhood. They still really don't like each other. But Jonathan is so good-natured that he tries to truly forgive Dio. It's becoming clear that Joseph is becoming old enough to inherit the fortune. And of course, being the actual Joestar, he's going to get everything, whereas Dio will probably get nothing. And also during this time, the Joestar family has received this special stone mask from the Aztecs in America. And it is said that the person who wears this will be granted with immortality. And yeah, George picked it up as a trinket. He doesn't think anything about it, but Dio is becoming a little obsessed with it. He wants immortality. He wants power. And he doesn't like the fact that Jonathan is likely to gain the fortune shortly, so Dio poisons George Joestar. And while Jonathan doesn't have proof of this, he's fairly certain that it was Dio doing it. So he travels into London to try to find a cure. And he ends up on this street known as Ogre Street, where he runs into a gang. And the gang is led by a thug named Robert E.O. Speedwagon. Yeah, so this is one of the first things that's like super odd about this series. And you'll find it throughout the entire series is that they name a bunch of characters after rock bands. So you have REO Speedwagon is Robert E.O. Speedwagon. And there's not too many like that in this. There's a man that we will meet later called Zeppeli, which I'm pretty sure is a reference to Led Zeppelin. But you really don't get that until later on when you have a lot more of these oddball characters. Like, the next series arcs, the villains are named AC/DC and Cars, and yeah. There's a lot more coming, so... And it's one of those things that has made translating... I know that it has made the translation between the English and the Japanese very difficult, because in Japan, nope, they don't care that those are trademark names, whereas here, that's a big deal. So you can't have a character that's named, AC/DC, so they have to spell it funky or change it slightly for the American release. But yeah, so Speedwagon decides that he's going to fight Jonathan Joestar, and he has a hat that he removes the brim on, revealing a secret blade, and he uses it as a weapon. So he is basically Kung Lao from Mortal Kombat. But Jonathan is full of determination and fights through the bleeding and manages to not only defeat REO Speedwagon, but Speedwagon is so impressed by Jonathan and everything that he did that he becomes Jonathan's loyal manservant, basically. He becomes his number 2. He's like, I will follow you to the ends of the earth no matter what type of person. During all of this, Dio has taken the stone mask and he wants to test it, see if there is a way to actually make someone immortal. So he finds this drunk person and shoves it on them. So they put the stone mask on, it clamps into the skull, drills in, and transforms the drunkard into a vampire, who nearly kills Dio right away, but is destroyed when hit by the sunlight. So now Dio knows how the mask works and can grant himself immortality at any time. Jonathan and Speedwagon have managed to get the cure. They give it to the father, and they expose Dio of his schemes. Dio, in desperation and rage, pulls a knife and tries to stab Jonathan Joestar, but George Joestar jumps in the way, dying to save his son's life. Dio and Jonathan end up fighting, and Jonathan ends up winning, but Dio still has the mask, and he puts it on, and he turns himself into a vampire. And using his superior vampire strength, he breaks Jonathan's arm and is beating the crap out of him. And the house sets ablaze. While trying to keep Dio from escaping, Jonathan tackles him and pushes both of themselves off of the second story into the lobby, but Dio impales himself on the statue in the middle of the house. Jonathan barely manages to make it out before the building burns down around him. Jonathan has survived. He has a broken arm at this point from nearly dying from Dio. He is hanging out with his love, Irina, who is the girl next door. While with her, he's visited by a strange man named of Will A. Zeppeli. And he tells Jonathan that Dio is not dead, that Dio has somehow managed to survive, and he is creating an army of vampires and zombies. Because if he uses the mask, they become a vampire. If he feeds on them, and they become zombies. And that if Jonathan wants to defeat him, there are only two ways. One is direct sunlight, and the other is through the special fighting technique known as Harmon. And Harmon is basically a supernatural style of breathing that'll let you access your own energy and your own soul and power, and give you basically sunlight in your fingertips type of thing. And Zeppeli uses his powers to immediately heal Jonathan's broken arms, and they begin training for that. And Jonathan,
he picks it up, but he has some very difficulties with it. It is not an easy style of combat to learn. It requires a completely different method of breathing. It's basically you're holding in your body's energy and your solar energy inside yourself through very specific type of light breathing. Yeah, it's interesting, but also kind of like, well, magic-y. So
Jonathan, Speedwagon, and Zeppeli travel to this town known as Wind Knight's Lot, where Dio has been creating his army. And they end up fighting a bunch of zombies, but also a couple of vampires. One of which is Jack the Ripper. Somehow Dio found Jack the Ripper and then turned him into a vampire to work for him. During the battle with a particular vampire named Tarkus, Zeppeli, unfortunately, is killed. And using his last breath and energy, he passes on all of his Harmon energy into Jonathan, basically making him superpowered. Jonathan and Speedwagon are joined by two other Harmon users who were working with Zeppeli, and they managed to go in and destroy most of Dio's army and get to Dio, and basically ends up using all of his Harmon to destroy Dio's body down to the molecule. However, his head is missing and is unsure what happened. So Jonathan and Irina get married, and they are going off to America for their honeymoon. They're on a boat.
But they are followed by Dio's servant named Wang Chen, and he has snuck aboard on a coffin with Dio's severed head, which is still alive and still mocking Jonathan. And their plan is they are going to remove Jonathan's head and stick Dio's head on Jonathan's body. How that would work, I have no idea, but that is the plan. And Jonathan manages to fight them off. He kills off Wang Chen using the last of his energy, but the ship catches ablaze. Jonathan doesn't have the energy to escape, so he just grabs Dio's head as the ship sinks into the ocean. But Irina manages to escape using the same coffin that Dio had snuck on in, and she and a baby managed to survive. and Irina turns out to be pregnant with Jonathan's son.
And we get a hint of what is to come in the next arc, that it will focus on Jonathan's grandson, Joseph Joestar. But that's kind of how this one ends, and
it's a little interesting. It's really short. It's less than 50 chapters of a manga. It's not even that many episodes, like less than 30 would be my guess, but it's pretty quick. It gives you an idea of what the series is going to be, what it's going to be talking about. It's going to be about these strong men fighting the undead zombie hordes and using Homon to do that. And you can really kind of see where the series might go. And it's really interesting when you get to it how it goes nowhere near that place. But we'll get to that when we get to that. I don't want to spoil it up too much. But it's like you can tell that the author could see the same path that I did and went nope and went the other way. But as far as being like a bizarre adventure, it's got a little bit of bizarre in this. You got vampires, you got zombies, but it's not truly that bizarre. In fact, I don't think it would really become bizarre until you get into probably season 3 or season 4, where things really get off the railing. But for this one, it's a pretty solid beginning. You get a good villain out of Dio Brando. You have a decent male lead. He's not great. So Jonathan is a very white bread hero. He is goody two shoes, very the epitome of everything good and righteous and moral about men. So he's kind of the Superman, or he's what people think of when they think of Superman in that sense, that he has no flaws. It's like,
and then every other hero in the series is more along is the rest of the Justice League that are a little bit more interesting or a little bit more going from. It's like you can do something interesting with Jonathan, and they did some stuff. Like Brando is a great adversary for Jonathan because he is the complete opposite. He is one of the most easy to detest villains because he is a braggart, he is vindictive, he is cruel. Like, I will never, ever forget him burning that dog. That is and I'm not an animal person. Animals being hurt in movies don't affect me the way they do real animal people. I can usually get over that, but I will never forget that. And it just, like, ugh. Yeah, so it's one of those things, like, if you are very sensitive to animals being hurt, this might not be the one to start with. Maybe skip them as kids and start at them as adults. Because nothing that bad happens again, but...
And I do like a lot of it, that you get the little bit interesting idea with the vampires and the stone masks, and that this ties into the Aztecs in some way, and it's supposed to grant immortality, to which I'm like, if you can't go in sunlight, what's the point of the immortality? But it's like, it's not immortality necessarily in that sense, but it's still kind of an interesting retake on vampirism and fighting vampires. It's kind of Buffy before Buffy, a little bit. And I like this setting. The 19th century England is really interesting. I like the fact that they're actually British people in the story. They are not like half Japanese or full Japanese. Like, that's very rare to come across in a Japanese manga. I really enjoyed this arc of the series. It's not my favorite. It is, and I can totally see people being like, this is the weakest of them. And you might be right, you might not be. I don't know. I think it's a good starting point. I don't think it has enough to have it stand heads and toes above the rest of it. But for a first effort and a starting line, I have seen way worse. Has some really well thought out stuff. There's some really interesting things going on. And overall, yeah, I think it was just a well told beginning of an interesting and ultimately bizarre adventure. So, what do you all think? Did you like this arc? Do you dislike this arc? Is Dio your favorite villain? Let me know in the comments. I will be getting to the second arc, which is Battle Tendencies, at some point. I'm not going to set in stone when that will be, because my hope is I will have more ideas and more things to talk to you about than just this. We will see. Until then, happy reading, y'all, and I'll see you soon. Bye!